Good morning, everyone. We will now commence the webinar, Procurement Documents Increasing Engagement and Usability for Project Managers. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land from which we are joining today at LGP, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We also acknowledge the traditional owners of many lands from which you're viewing this webinar. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also would like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders joining us today. Some housekeeping tips for this session. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website for future access. The microphones have been muted. However, feel free to post your questions via the Q&A and chat box, and we will answer them during the Q&A sessions at the end of the webinar. I'm now delighted to introduce our speaker for today's session, Ananda Sharma. Ananda is an experienced procurement consultant specializing in end-to-end procurement support for New South Wales Local Council. She holds a postgraduate degree in Certificate 4 in Procurement and Contracting and brings over a decade of experience across procurement, governance and strategy, as well as market research in Australia, the USA and India. At LGP, Ananda supports councils by delivering practical procurement solutions, including procurement planning, tender and RFQ facilitation, evaluation support, negotiation, and contract management. Her work is grounded in strong governance and risk management with a focus on achieving value for councils. Over to you, Ananda.
Thank you, Charlene, for that kind introduction and welcome all. I'll be facilitating today's session on simplifying. Sorry, for a minute. Thank you, Charlene, for that kind introduction and welcome all. I'll be facilitating today's session on simplifying procurement documents for increasing engagement and usability for project managers. This is a topic that comes up again and again when I speak with project managers across local government. Procurement documentation can feel like one of the biggest blockers to getting projects off the ground efficiently. So in response, today we have a practical experience-based session planned for you. We'll cover the foundations of good procurement documentation to increase usability and engagement, hear a real-world case study from our guest speaker, and finish with some own solutions and Q&A where you can bring your own challenges and questions. Before we talk about simplification, let's make sure we are all on the same page about what procurement documents we are actually talking about. There are 5 core documents most project managers will encounter. First is the procurement plan. This is created before you go to the market and captures your strategy, budget, timeline, and risk considerations. Next is the request for quote or request for tender, the formal document you send to the market to invite supply response. The evaluation plan and evaluation matrix come next. They set out how you'll assess and score these supply responses in a fair, consistent, and defensible way. This is followed by reporting, which means presenting the evaluation outcomes and value for money recommendation for approval to the delegate or to the council. And finally, the contract management plan, which governs what happens after award, how you will monitor performance, manage the relationship, and handle variations. Each of these documents has a job to do. The question is, are they designed in a way that helps project managers to do that job, or do they create friction around it? Now that we've covered the 5 procurement documents, it's worth acknowledging something that most council experience in practice, and I'm sure all of you are thinking aloud. Procurement rarely involves only these 5 documents. It's more like 25 documents. Across the procurement lifecycle, councils typically deal with a broader set of supporting documents. This is not to add red tape, but to strengthen governance, maintain probity, and create a defensible audit trail. Purpose of this slide isn't to intimidate you or suggest that everyone needs to be an expert in every document. It's simply to acknowledge that the procurement documentation operates as a system, and that complexity often comes from how that system is designed or experienced. For non-procurement project managers, this volume of documentation can feel overwhelming, not because they lack the capability, but because procurement is specialized. And that's where training and practical guidance becomes essential, helping people understand what is required at each stage and why. To make sense of this volume of documentation, it helps to anchor everything to the procurement lifecycle. This is the next slide, and it'll show you how these documents align across each stage of the procurement lifecycle. Now, when you look at all the documents I showed you in the previous slide, they all fit into the procurement and contract management lifecycle somewhere on the spectrum. The lifecycle consists of three broad stages: planning, sourcing, and contract management, with sub-stages in between. We start with planning. Planning is where the procurement plan is developed, needs are analyzed, budgets approved, sought, and strategy is set before approaching the market. Stage 2 is sourcing market engagement. This is where the sourcing or market engagement. This is where the RFT or RFQ is prepared. SOWs and specifications are released, COIs are signed, and site visits are undertaken. Responses are assessed using the evaluation matrix. Negotiation, execution, and formally notifying both successful and unsuccessful suppliers takes place. And this is often where the bulk of document complexity is felt by the project managers. Stage 3 is contract management. This begins after the contract is signed, and it is about the ongoing work of managing delivery, performance, and supply relationship until the contract closes. When procurement documents are designed as a part of this life cycle, they should make a project manager's job easier. Let's look at some of the common challenges that project managers face. First is perceived complexity. Sometimes the documents, especially the procurement documents, need to be lengthy, like the procurement plan, to cover everything from a governance, risk, audit, and probity point of view. But these comprehensive templates can feel overwhelming without a clear structure or staging. Also, the documents should be of length equal to their risk. Simple documents do not need to be over-engineered. Second is inconsistent format. This is a real problem, especially in larger councils, where different versions exist across different teams in the council, creating confusion about which template is current and authoritative. Third is duplicate information. This is a surprisingly common challenge as well. The same project description, the same budget figures, same risk items appearing in 3 different documents. This wastes time and creates version conflicts. Fourth is unclear requirements. This is another challenge, and it might be the most damaging of all. When instructions use legal or policy language rather than practical guidance, project managers either guess or avoid filling sections at all. Complex, poorly structured templates slow procurement initiation, delay projects, and push managers towards workarounds or avoidance. When documents are confusing or skipped, critical information is missed, creating audit gaps and governance risk. Last but not the least, also changes in legislation need to be incorporated. Project managers need to be confident that what they're using reflects the latest change in legal framework we operate under. So what makes procurement documentation effective? These 4 principles I'm about to showcase consistently improve usability and lift engagement. First is clear structure. Clear structure means document is logically organized and mirrors the way a project manager might think about procurement. Sections flow in a natural sequence, headings are easy to navigate, and guidance notes are kept separate from the document itself so they don't crowd the working space. Excessive fields, redundant questions, and legal jargon deter completion. The level of detail should be proportionate to the risk and complexity of procurement. High-risk procurement needs more detail. Low-risk ones shouldn't be over-engineered. Second is plain language. It means writing for the person completing the document, not for the legal reviewer or the policy officer. Short sentences, active voice, no unexplained acronyms or jargon. Third is practical guidance. This goes beyond instruction. It means you have worked examples that show what good answers look like. It means inline prompts that explain exactly what each field is asking for, and the best templates make it hard to get this wrong. Regular updates. Keep documents current and trusted. Incorporate legislative and policy changes. Maintain version control and a dated change log. Also, there should be a feedback loop with the users from time to time. None of these are technically complex to implement. The challenges are usually organizational, finding the time, the appetite, and stakeholder support to do this properly. When procurement documentation is designed this way, structured, clear, supported, and current, engagement increases, confidence improves, and compliance becomes easier to achieve. And what underpins the simplification of procurement documentation is training and change management. A good tip would be to have an overarching guiding document or flowchart that goes along with the procurement document suite that explains end to end what documents are needed, at what stage, and the purpose. When project managers understand the purpose behind the documents, they feel supported in using them, and the process becomes far less intimidating and far more effective. Lastly, I'll leave you with an example of what a template before, which is overly complex, and after, a streamlined template looks like, and what a clear document looks like. Take a moment to absorb the contrast before and after. To bring what I've been talking about to life, I'm now pleased to invite our guest speaker, Marcella Nassar, Coordinator Procurement and Contracts from Snowy Monaro Regional Council, who will share their journey in simplifying procurement documentation. Marcella is an experienced professional with a strong background in business operations, law, human resources, and governance, with a particular focus on compliance, risk management, and organizational performance across both government and private sector organizations. Throughout their career, they have worked across a range of sectors, including health, aged care, finance, education, construction, and energy, often supporting organizations operating in regional, rural, and remote communities. Their multidisciplinary experience enables them to analyze complex issues, manage operational and strategic risks, and deliver practical outcome-focused solutions. Over to you, Marcella.
Thank you, Ananda. Good morning, everyone. If we can go to the next slide, I'm just going to share my experience in the change management at Snowy Monaro Regional Council. I took on this role 2 years ago, and the briefing from the executive was simple at the time. We needed to bring chaos to order. So when I took on the role, we primarily came out of financial sustainability review. The recommended few actions needed to be taken in the procurement space. Sorry, there we go. In the procurement space, we needed to organise our procurement model and framework. We needed to implement greater financial controls across the organisation. It was the right time to do it 2 years ago. We had a new executive, a new council in a very hot and volatile political environment that it was screaming for this change. Our goal was not just changing documentation. Our role was just to facilitate procurement delivery across different business units of council, supporting our people and the resources we had at the time. We needed to have corporate oversight of what was going on in our council, but we also needed our people to be engaged and to uptake the change. So the centralised procurement model that we ran back 22 years ago, meant that there was a lot of inconsistencies in our practices. So we not just only use different forms, different templates, different terms and conditions. We also were given a perception in the market that we were unprofessional because people were going out with different approaches. So we needed to fix that quite quickly. The main risk to us was, again, that inconsistent communication with our market. We've got a very thin market in our regional area. We're just not only a regional town, but we're also a border town, which means that our challenges are even greater. The inconsistency in documentation and market approach meant that there was a perception of reduced transparency in our processes, and that directly impacts council's reputational damage or image in the market. Again, when we decided that this problem that we had with the inconsistent forms was greater than just the forms, we noticed that the market has lost trust in council's operation. We noticed that we had significant compliance issues and governance issues across our procurement practices, and that needed a quick win. We needed to fix that quite quickly. The suppliers also had lost the trust in the way that we're doing things because certain business units approached the market in this way, providing clear guidance. Others didn't provide clear guidance or didn't provide guidance at all. So the suppliers pretty much didn't know what way to go with us. So one of the main things we needed to do was to change our procurement model. And we did that quite quickly. So 2 years ago, they created a position within council to provide a central-led model of procurement. So whilst individual business unit retained autonomy in running their own procurement processes, there was a level of corporate oversight about how we're doing this and how we went out to market and what forms do we use and what things do we do. But the change wasn't going to be easy because it needed to be soft, it needed to be in line with the capabilities within the team. Yeah, okay. So I was talking about the central-led procurement model, how we needed to implement these changes. And one of the quick ones, and the first one, was implementing the standardized forms and templates. We needed to ensure that those forms and templates where there was a version of control centralized as well. And we also needed to ensure that there was corporate oversight and strategic guidance for our staff across different business units. But we needed to seed the way for change. We couldn't just bring the change without collaboration. So initially it was just about understanding that it wasn't just about the forms. We needed to create an environment or a procurement environment where people stop looking at procurement as an administrative task, but rather a strategic task to achieve council's outcomes. We needed to collaborate with others to listen to the input and to close the gaps that we had at the moment. But we needed some quick wins because people generally don't see change as a positive. So we needed to achieve some quick wins. So the way that we did that was by reviewing the existing documentation, what we had, and just making small improvements to that before we developed a larger plan that was going to take longer to implement. So the change obviously was primarily understanding and making people understand that it isn't just about the forms. The forms were just going to be the tools that was going to help people achieve their ultimate outcome. But it's about changing the mindset, like I said before. It's about people understanding that procurement isn't just going shopping, that procurement is more about a strategic activity within council that is fundamental to achieve the operational and delivery plan. So we decided to implement this change softly. So initially it was, we need to complete this change, but this time, and then we realized that that wasn't going to work. So we did a soft launch of forms, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more further down the track. We needed to spend time with people across different business units to really validate the challenges that we're facing, to really hear what they were saying, to accept criticism and understand that that is an opportunity for improvement that we needed to hear and we needed to implement. So some of the lessons learned was obviously engage the right help. So in our council, I am the team. I've got a few stores under me, but I am the team. So I'm the only procurement person in our council. So I need to get external help. And external help for me was fundamental. That person or that group of people needed to understand the operational aspect of council. So someone that doesn't have operational expertise is really not going to help in the delivery of such a fundamental change in the procurement space. Obviously, they needed to have local government insights, and it was important for me that they understand the regional council's challenges because they're quite different from a city council. So for me, that was fundamental to feel supported in the delivery of this change. Also, you know, having a simple message that overly detailed, complicated, complex forms are just not going to be taken up. People are always going to go around the forms to achieve their outcome if I give them something that is going to be intimidating for them. The reality is that I had to scale back many times throughout the journey. You know, I had a set time of delivery, it just didn't happen. So we just needed to accept that the setback was part of the change and the process. Again, this message is important. Simplicity drives adoption. So giving the team a 40-page form to add to the 20-page form that they already completed is not effective, and it's not what we wanted to do. We needed to have forms that were clear, intuitive, easy to complete, and there were people going to use them and feel supported rather than an administrative burden of another form. So to do that, I think communication with my team and the teams across council were essential. I needed to bring them along on the journey of change with me. They needed clear guidance. They needed clear training. Sometimes that meant one-on-one, many a times on the same form. But, you know, the good thing of that is that at the end of the journey, they were going to accept the change and they were going to continue to come to us or to me or the finance team, you know, when they had questions or when they had opportunities for improvement or when they had things that they wanted to bring up in the procurement space. So they felt supported through the change. Training was fundamental and it continues to be fundamental. So we actually deliver once a month training on the week before the council meeting. The training is open for everyone, even if you don't have procurement delegations, so we can build capabilities within our team. I just want to quickly talk about the positive outcomes that this change is delivering. We are not quite there yet, but I think that we have seen some significant organisational efficiencies achieved across our business units, you know, reducing the administrative burden of procurement. We speed up the process by having standardised forms and documentation. We improve consistency, so the perception of council's image going out to market is now much more robust and consistent across business units. All the documents look the same, or the message is the same. So they're baby steps, but we're getting there. And we also reduce duplication of efforts, which means people don't have to go and rewrite terms and conditions in our tendering documentation or in our RFQ documentation that are already written. Obviously, one of the most important positive outcomes achieved was the improvement in the governance and compliance space. So in the decentralized model, we found it incredibly difficult at times, especially at audit time, to find documentation in a centralized space. Record keeping wasn't great. And with that comes the impact on transparency, or I guess the perception of transparency in our processes. We needed to ensure that our forms and documentations had that level of compliance, not just the logistic compliance, but the new policy that we adopted. And I think that centralizing that and having oversight over that has achieved this outcome quickly. In fact, I think that was one of our quick wins. As I mentioned before, one of our challenges in our regional town is attracting and retaining capabilities. So we needed to look within and understand that perhaps one of the biggest accountabilities we had was to build the capabilities of the people that we had. And so with clear and consistent documentation, processes and tools, people understand the process better. People are most likely to follow it, and it's going to be easier to train them. So people feel supported. So when they've got a new person coming in, they're able to show them the process because exactly that is simple, it's intuitive, and it's easy to learn. It also reduces reliance on one specialist staff, especially in our council, which was only me. So people now are able to communicate with one another because the message and the framework is consistent across the organisation. So if one doesn't have the answer, most likely another person in a different team might. So it has improved cross-collaboration across council as well. And ultimately, it also improves staff confidence. When people feel trained and they feel that they have the right tools, they go into the process of procurement, whether it is the upstream procurement or the downstream procurement in the contract management space, with more confidence in negotiation, more confidence in developing scopes and things like that. So that was, I think, one of a positive outcome as well. And like I said, we are not quite there. It's a journey to improvement. We will continue to improve. Reducing our risk, of course, or at least mitigation strategies to reduce our risks. One of them was a reputational risk. We needed to regain that market trust. We needed to ensure that the reputational risk or council's image was improved out there. And I think we are doing that with the small improvements that we're bringing out. Any contractual and commercial risks were also reduced. We found in the past that people use templates that they have used before back in 1923, which inconsistent clauses that weren't up to scratch in terms of legislative changes or even policy changes. So having that oversight has reduced that risk significantly. And of course, improves decision-making by presenting information that is more clear. So it evidenced a process of decision-making, and in that way reduces the risk of to transparency and property in general. And lastly, but not less importantly, is that improve the relationship with a supplier, with the market in general. So it makes it easy for suppliers to understand council's process. So we have actually created a line in the sand where we said this is our processes and systems across council. So the market needs to adjust to those processes. We will support them through the change as well. Promotes fairness and transparency in procurement processes. So suppliers are no longer going, oh, the water team wants me to do that, but the infrastructure team wants me to do that, because now our processes are standardized across council. And overall, it just creates a perception that we are more professional and we have more consistency in the way that we approach the market and that we conduct our procurement. And that's it for me. Thank you for listening. Ananda?
Thank you, Marcella, for that insightful case study and guidance and knowledge you shared with us. What I took from it was the mitigation strategies, having a more central-led procurement, simplified documents, and if your council is not centralized, maybe uniform templates used across different teams in the council. I also liked what you said about seeding change, education, communication, and the exercise of change management. The team at SPS can really help you if you have the need for procurement documentation review. We have a wide variety of experience with procurement document review and updation, especially with councils like Midcoast. We've done work with Riverina, Snowy Monaro, and Blacktown and Coffs Harbours, to name a few. We also provide ready-to-use templates via SPS Buy. SPS Buy, you can go on to LGP's website and access SPS Buy there. It supports every phase of procurement, from planning to tendering through to evaluation contract management. Visit our website and register and go through the documents and order. We also have a special offer for those attending today. So we offer a 10% on any procurement documentation review and updation services that you might choose to engage us for, and 15% off if you buy more than 3 documents of SPS buy, and this offer is valid until 31st April 2026. And that reaches the conclusion of today's presentation, and it has given us, I think we're over time, a bit of time to hand over to you for any questions or comments. Charlene, do we have any questions or comments from the audience?
I'm just having a look now. I don't see any in the chat Q&A, but I do have a couple of questions in general. First one would be, which procurement document causes the most frustration in your organization, either LGP or Snowy?
From my point of view, it's the evaluation plan, the longer procurement documentations that require a lot of thinking from governance, probity aspects that cause quite a bit of frustration. What about you, Marcella?
Yeah, from our perspective, I think that operationally, one of the most frustrating parts of procurement is the planning. I think that people don't understand the importance, or it's not that they don't understand, but we work so reactively in local government in response to our community needs, that the planning was the challenging part for me, especially in this change. Yeah.
We have another one from Mustafa Kamal. They said, you recommend that councils should use standard procurement templates across all business units. However, each business unit has a different operational needs, technical requirements, and risk profiles. The most sensitive part of any procurement document is the evaluation criteria, which is where governance and probity issues usually arise. If the business units still develop their own evaluation criteria, then the only thing that becomes standardized is the format, not the governance approach. How does LGP recommend ensuring consistency, probity, and strong governance in evaluation criteria while still using standard templates across diverse business units?
That's a very good question. Well, you raised a very fair point that the operational needs of different teams are different, and there are different natures of procurements being undertaken across the council. But what we've got to understand is that the framework of the procurement documentations, it remains the same. So there has to be an evaluation plan. There has to be a procurement plan that needs to get released, and the sequence of the documentation, everything remains standard. Yes, you're right. Having standard templates would improve compliance, and it doesn't hinder a team specific or area specific procurement. It would I would say just changing the weighted criteria and changing the weights according to the procurement that you're after should be fine. But yeah, procurement documents need to be standardized overall.
And I think that's where the planning comes from. So it's spending a lot of time with your teams understanding the procurement needs and how you're going to evaluate that procurement, and setting the weightings doesn't mean that the templates cannot be standardized, specifically in terms of legislation and policy of council. But yeah, the weighing criteria, I spend an incredible amount of time with infrastructure and water and things like that, planning and strategizing over the weighing criteria or the assessment criteria of each procurement.
Yeah, so everything can be standardized and you can customize the documents to suit your needs.
I have a question for you, Ananda, and you, Marcella. we talked about documents, legislation, and so on. So I guess one question that maybe lots of people in the audience have is, how do you balance simplification with legal and policy requirements? There are councils where legal is heavily involved in the procurement process. So over to you.
I think that so far for me is about ensuring that the templates and the forms are created with the input from everyone, including legal. So then by the time that you get to the procurement, the input is already within those standardized forms. So everyone's work is valued and inputted into the forms. So you ended up with a product or with an ultimate form that incorporates everyone's needs, not just the individual business units, but governance, compliance, legal, finance, etc.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much all of the questions we've received. Let me see if there's one last one we could do. You think we have time for one more, Nanda?
Yeah, go for it. That'll be the
just
last one.
Yep, the last one we've received from Isabel da Jordana. She says, "Hi Marcella, how often do you run training sessions on the use of templates at your council, and which type of training do you find most effective?"
So again, I'll go back to the message that it isn't just about the forms. The training is not just about the form. We run it once a month on the week before council meeting. So we started this approach with finance. So we did a finance training, then we incorporated procurement in general. And now we're moving on to incorporating how do you run an RFQ? How do you run a tender? So within that training, we incorporate the forms. So it's just about changing the environment, not just about the form. So we do it, like I said, once a month. It's set. We do it through Elmo. We do it on site. People can visit on site. We also do it online. But yeah, it needs to be consistent. It's hard work, but it pays out. Hopefully that answered that question.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. This concludes our webinar presentation today. Thank you, Marcella, for being so insightful. The SPS team and myself appreciate the time you've taken to join us today.